Thank you, Dr. Tim. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome and deserving. Have a wonderful show.
Thank you. So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of MindShifters Radio, and today is Thursday, March the 30th, 2023. And our calling number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you in the queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And I'll just, while I'm waiting on Michael to dial in, he and his brother actually went out to the store, and he's on his way back. But so he asked me if I could talk a little bit. So I'm going to expand on one of the things that Dr. Tim was just talking about in the observations. My greatest strengths will at times be my greatest weaknesses, and my greatest assets at times will be my greatest liabilities. And I have found, just in this last week, in attempting to get things settled with my dad's estate and get arrangements made, and we already had this vacation set up, and some of the other family already had plans made, and so there was just so many things that was had to be considered otherwise, and yet what I call my OCD, Michael says sometimes it can be OCB, the obsessive compulsive blessing, and yet at times I think it is a disorder. And it's just like, for instance, the church that my dad used to attend had written to me this morning and was like, are you going to do a memorial here at the church for your dad? And I was like, well, no, we decided, especially since there was a delay, that we were just going to do graveside at the family cemetery. And the part of me that wants to make everybody happy and make sure everything is organized and everything falls in place just right, and staying on top of it. And so I texted both of my brothers and I said, this is what I told the church, do I need to say anything else or just leave it at that? I mean, it's kind of like I needed, I felt like I wasn't completing something and I needed validation from them that it was okay for me to leave it at that. And so it's trying to find a different way of looking at the whole situation and letting go of some of the responsibility. And, my brothers have said, when we get together on Wednesday, that they'll take over doing the farm account. I can get that off of my plate. And so it's like, okay, handing everything over and letting it go. So anyway, if anybody has any input on that or advice for me, I am open to hearing it. But it's just challenging times and trying to do everything right. And I think that's one of my, it is one of my strengths that I stick with a job, a task until I get it done, and I do it what I would call right. There's, few errors in that. However, realizing I can't control everything and can't control the way something is perceived, and, especially like the people of the church, and, there's part of me that, I've had to do worksheets on this because it's like, they've got a new preacher now, which is a lot different, but the preacher that they had before never came to visit Dad in the last 3 years, and, very seldom did he hear from anyone. They didn't call or send a card or anything, so, it's like part of me wanted to say, why should you be able to spend time with him now that he's dead? It's like, and I have to work on that's my stuff. And I didn't express that as why we're not doing it at the church, but that is part of the reason. And so, I'm having to do worksheets on that because that is my stuff. So anyway, the lines are open, 563-999-3581, and press 1 if you would like to add something to that, or, just talk to me. Spending a few minutes time here until Michael can get dialed in. we did have a question come in, which I told Michael I would read once he got on the show. Somebody asked a really good question, and so I'll share that once he gets on. However, in the meantime, somebody talk to me. Press 1. Good at rambling and doing monologues as Michael is. So anyway, we have had a good time with Michael's family. His brother and his brother's girlfriend came down, and Michael J., Michael's son, and his wife Jamie and the baby, Kaylee Joe, flew out. Ryan and Gabby flew up for 4 days. So, and then some of the nieces and nephews all came up just for 1 day, or I guess came down. They came from Canada. And so, you know, we've had a good time taking pictures. And then last night it started snowing. Really done a whole lot of quote-unquote work. And so he's a little behind on his article. But he'll be getting that, and we'll get it out on the website probably within a couple of days of getting back home. And so anyway, love to hear from you. Make it a whole lot easier than talking to myself here. I hope that I'm coming across. I hope that you're hearing me. So anyway, so if you go to whyagain.org, we're going to also be updating pictures on our garden that we're doing. You know, we're planting native wildflowers that are native to Virginia, to the area that we're in. And that's supposed to be the most beneficial thing you can do to bring in the pollinators for the other plants, for the vegetables and things like that. And we're updating pictures and putting those out on the website. You'll be able to see how our garden is going, how the what they call it, national park, homegrown national park. And so we'll have that in our backyard. So you'll be able to see how that's going, and hopefully it'll inspire you, even if you just live in an apartment and have just a balcony, to be able to grow and help your environment, to help you by growing your own food. And so hopefully that'll help inspire you for that. So 563-999 3581 and press 1. If you have any questions on, you know, the newest worksheet, which has been simplified a little bit, it is out on the website. And the easiest place to find all the worksheets is to click on the Start Here button. Had someone the other day that was attempting to find the PowerPoint presentation. So if you click the Start Here on the website, then it will take you, the first things you'll see will be direct links to take you to the latest worksheets. And then there are some videos on how to navigate both the app and the website. Then when you scroll on down, there's chapter 24, and then there is the PowerPoint for Aramaic forgiveness. When you click that, you'll be able to do several things. One, there's the PowerPoint's now in Thai. Thank you, Tipia. But if you click on the main PowerPoint, it will take you to where you can actually download that as a Microsoft PowerPoint onto your own computer. There's also the script to it, and then the YouTube presentation with the audio from Bill Constantino. And then there's also a presentation on Vimeo. So you can get all of those right there. And then there's all the other, you know, below it is the mini versions of the wake-up sheet. And also there's an adaptations by other Why teachers. So if you have an adaptation to the worksheet, send it to Michael, and then once he gives the okay on it, then I'll put it on the website as an adaptation by one of the Why Again teachers. We're still looking at Heartland for this summer. That hasn't been solidified. There's been so much else going on. However, we've had several people say they're interested in doing the food fund forgiveness and work. And the dates that we're looking at, I've got this on the website as well. If you click under schedules in Heartland Season 2023, it will take you to the events page. And there you'll see that what we're tentatively looking at is doing the first part of July, the 16-day food fund forgiveness and work. And that's getting the buildings and the grounds and everything ready. There's work projects during the day, breathing on Saturday. There's classes each evening, and we set it up so that people only need to take 2 full weeks. It won't break up a week. Then there's a few days in between, and we're looking at doing the 9-day why and potentially the 9-day teacher's training following that if there's enough people interested. The Steiner-Waldorf group had decided not to use the facility. I think they had some issues with all of their people getting signed up for it, and so they're not going to be using Heartland this year, but that's a potential for the future. And so anyway, if you're interested in participating in any of that, even Julie from Spain, Julie that used to be in Oregon, and she's now in Spain, she said they're going to be stateside, and potentially that she could participate in the food fund as well. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. And other than that, looking at the schedule, we have, of course, the 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month is the book club. And I believe that London has now switched over. Therefore, a couple of weeks we were only 4 hours difference, and now I think we're back to 5. And then, no, this is the 5th Thursday. And then the 3rd Saturday of each month, we do still point breathing. So those are both listed on the website under schedule. So if you're interested in either of those, please let us know. And I see Michael has joined us. I'm not sure if he's ready to talk yet or not, but
I am.
When he is, okay. Well,
I'll be here.
If you want to do an introduction or something, and then we do have a question. I'm actually flipping over to that other email so that I can get it.
Okay. Well, let's go for the question. I'm ready to rock and roll. We're out here in Snowland and got some errands done, getting ready to travel tomorrow.
Right.
So.
Let me scroll down. Okay. They said I had sent them information on where to find the PowerPoint video, and they said one question about the process. In Michael's very early videos, he talks about the deciding factor regarding our perception regarding our perception conscious level is the JS, the judgment system. Later videos, he says goals are the deciding factor. I'm just wondering why the change and whether the judgment system still plays an important role in our perception. And they would like to understand the difference or the change.
Okay, cool. It's a good question. Obviously, whoever's asking, who was it that asked?
They didn't sign it, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, in any event, the judgment system would be a record in the mind of judgments that we hold from the past. And that wouldn't be just our lives, but literally the generations. So the first answer the mind gives is going to come from the judgment system, which storehouse of data. And I don't recall anywhere in the past where I've thought of that as what decides what behavior is going to be or what reality is going to be constructed by the mind. The automatic decision system ties right in with that, and decisions in the mind are a result of resonance. And so if I say don't think about the color of your car, I just set up a resonance around the idea of the color of someone's car, and the automatic decision system kicks in with whatever resonates in the mind about the color of one's car. In fact, I've had people in a workshop say, well, I'm not thinking about it. I was like, oh, really? What is it you're not thinking about? In order not to think about it, resonance took over, saying don't think about the color of your car. The don't part doesn't mean anything. It's the body of the statement, and that's where regulatory speech comes in and becomes an important key. So there's a database there. The driver, so this would be the distinction for me, and if this isn't clear enough, I'd love to have a conversation. You can call into the show and we can hone it right in to the most refined points that you're looking for, and maybe I'll learn something and maybe you'll learn something from it. So perception being a construct of the mind, reflects what's in the judgment system and served up by the automatic decision system. So that's the underlying factor. Now, the goal that's presented, the goal that someone commits to or accepts as active in their mind is the driver for that process. You remember we talked about the Harvard research that shows that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. So imagine you've got a database of 10,000 pieces of information rattling around, perhaps trillions of bits of information below that, at the root of that, but 10,000 that come into some level of activity. And then what this research at Harvard showed is that in that time frame where 10,000 units of electrical activity are happening in the brain, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. The actual lab stats were 7 plus or minus 2. So 9 bits of data is all that goes into structuring our conscious perceptual reality. And the thing that selects or becomes the resonating factor is the goal. You know, if you're receptive to what I say and I say, don't think about the color of your car, you've unconsciously accepted a goal, and something about the color of your car is going to resonate within you. And if I'm doing a worksheet, determining the exact, as specific a goal as I can come up with is going to refine the process and strengthen the ability to go to the deepest levels of healing in any given worksheet. So let's say I've got a situation where my mind tells me I'm upset with Bill because Bill didn't pay me what he owed me. So my goal might be just simply for Bill to pay me. And if that truly is the goal that's driving my perception, I've got all kinds of rage or sadness or whatever it is around Bill not paying me, then by canceling that goal, the driver for that construct of upset that my mind tells me is about Bill, it really isn't about Bill. It's my upset projected as my brain's image of Bill. So, but that might not really be the goal, even though the circumstance is Bill, I, and not being paid. The goal might be the real underlying goal, and that's why sometimes it takes many, many worksheets to get to the root of something. You know, in a general way, I want Bill to pay me. That's a goal, and that fits with the circumstance. But actually, what really might be going on for me is that when somebody doesn't honor me by paying me, I feel like, or I think I've been dishonored, and therefore I'm angry. So that tells me that I've got an issue in the file in my mind about being dishonored, and there's anger in there. So I say, Bill makes me angry when he doesn't pay me, but what I'm really saying is I have anger in my unconscious mind, maybe goes back 20 generations, and it's about not being honored. It might be about not being taken care of. You know, money being paid might be survival to me. So it might be a survival issue. It's like Bill, you know, doesn't support me living. You know, there could be 1,000 variations on the theme, and that's why the exact goal is the key, because it's literally the driver through resonance that recruits whatever the unconscious data is that contributes to my upset. So when I cancel that goal for Bill to honor me, then I get to drop into another level of healing beyond just I want Bill to pay me. And then when I process through that, the next layer of worksheet might be about Bill not paying me is a threat to my survival. And so I might end up, you know, on that third worksheet down the list, I might end up doing a worksheet around survival. And it might be that, you know, my real thinking is that Bill doesn't support my survival or is a threat to my survival. And so when I cancel the goal to survive, then I get to drop into that file in my mind where that pain is around survival. And again, it might be 20 generations old, or it might be when I was 2. You know, there's no way Well, I shouldn't say there's no way. It's not likely that memory is going to take you back to what it is that needs to be ultimately dealt with. But you do have to go back to that. So going back to what's the core of this issue, and in doing worksheets with people for the last 40 plus years, it always amazes me what kind of different things, when people cancel the goal, they drop into in terms of what they've been unconscious of. And so the reason I cancel the goal is not because I don't want to survive. It isn't because it isn't anything to do with the goal, except that the goal is the driver that recruits or causes my mind to use certain data. So it's the key way into healing that part of my mind. So I'm not canceling the goal because I don't want it. I do that worksheet on survival. I do that worksheet on being paid. And, when I'm finished with it, if I've cleaned that part out of my mind, I may go back and reestablish the same goal. I want Bill to pay me. But now when I load the goal for Bill to pay me, it doesn't resonate this unconscious part that has all kinds of pain and trauma in it. And so I have a clearer mind, and I can put an end to the conversation about somebody or something outside of me being the cause of what's moving inside of me, and I can touch directly into what underlies my pained perception. So it's not about, and I talked to somebody the other day, and they were like, well, but you told me I'm not supposed to have any goals. It's like, no, that's a total nothing ever like that. In fact, it was someone I was talking to, and we were talking about family situations. Like, you said never have any goals for your family. It's like, no, wait a minute. I have 1,000 goals for my family. That's perfectly appropriate to have goals for your family, to have plans for your family. The idea is that if you load that goal in your mind as a current event and it resonates upset out of the judgment system, then by canceling that goal, I collapse the end result of that resonance in my unconscious. I collapse that, and that opens a passageway into that part of my unconscious. Now, forgiveness has fulfilled its purpose. The returning your point to the place where the original event happened is not, again, a function of memory, it's a function of forgiveness. When I forgive, my mind will automatically drop into the place that my conscious pained perception is sourced from in my own unconscious. Otherwise, I'm wading through, trying to remember this deep, dark, dirty thing that happened in my past. It's like, never going to happen. You can lay on the couch for 20 years and you might get a little piece here and a little piece there, but it can take years and years and years. Whereas using the forgiveness process, because going back to the point where the original error occurred is a function of forgiveness. This perception that contains my pain comes directly from that part of me that's got a dissociated pain. And when I cancel the goal, it opens a passageway right into that, to the original root of that. Now, when I do touch into the original root, I may have a full-blown cognitive memory of the event. That often happens. And I may not have a full-blown cognitive memory, but energetically I'll process, I'll come back into direct relationship with the underlying pain or trauma and be able to breathe and hold the space of love and process through it, transmuting that pained perception or the root of that pained perception. So I hope that gets to where you're coming from and where you're going with that question. And if it doesn't, again, you're certainly welcome. If you don't have the opportunity to key into the radio show, you're certainly welcome to write back any response you have, and we'll take it up again on the show, or we could have a one-on-one conversation, which would, probably accelerate through the fine points of what it is that you're looking for. And I'm delighted that you're contemplating and doing the work on the level where you even have the brain cells to ask a question like that. That's awesome. Clearly, you're doing your work. So, sweet. Powerful. Any thoughts for you on that topic, Jeanie? Anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good.
So any other questions in our app or from emails, or?
That's all I have gotten so far.
Okay.
Well,
do we have anybody in the phone? Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, I was explaining earlier to everyone that depending on interest, that Heartland is still a possibility this year, and that, even Miss Julie from Spain is contemplating being part of it, and
cool.
To let us know sooner than later, and that you were working on an article, but that things have been a little bit busy and sidetracked, and so hopefully when we get back home that'll get finished.
Get settled back in, get caught up.
Yeah, hopefully except for Wednesday when we do Dad's service, we should be live the rest of the week. Thank you all for putting up with us doing recordings so often.
Well, I think the recordings, the simple fact that you're picking out some of the best, I think the recordings playing are just as valuable as a live show, even if it was a recording that somebody listened to when it originally played 2 years ago or 8 years ago or 10 years ago, 12 years ago. If you heard it the first time, then it'll have a whole different level and layer of meaning. So I think the repeating shows are a gift that really keep on giving. So do we have any in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, it is all quiet.
Well, if you're out there in listener land and you're listening on one of these stations, one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And if you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And then if you push 1, that will raise a hand in the control panel, and we'll be having a conversation. So if you are out there in the world of listeners, we're appreciating the fact that you're there, and that we're here wide open and ready for thoughts or questions. Has anybody got a question for us? Something to clarify in terms of the forgiveness process or any of the corollary tools?
There are no hands.
Okay, well, I'd come across a piece of writing that was kind of interesting about what's being called the adult-child syndrome, which seems like a little bit of an oxymoron. And one of the challenges a lot of times that I see in doing what's been called things like inner child work is that there's a tendency for that to put the issues that need to be resolved that were, in many cases initiated in childhood, to put us another arm's length away from it because, well, that's my inner child. I've heard people say, not owning that they're in upset or disturbance, but my inner child is in disturbance or upset. And so for me, it creates just another barrier, another way of separating. But I think it's, pretty close to the track that here we are as adults, and many people are still dealing with the things that happened in childhood. And, that all tends to go right back to the power person dynamic. And, we have people who are children of alcoholics, addicts of all kinds, hostility addicts, narcissistic, traumatized parents, depressed parents, parents who lived in a world where they were simply numbed out to everything, workaholic parents. It's like workaholism in this culture is looked at as, wow, isn't that awesome? That person works 80 hours a week and makes all kinds of money and they're successful. Talk to their families and see if working 80 hours a week is really a successful adult. And my offering would be no, but it's a result of those things that were modeled in childhood. Borderline psychotic parents, abusive parents, literally criminal parents are all issues that adults get to deal with. And when we can cut through the core of so much of that by understanding the power person dynamic and the pattern of disempowering oneself modeled by the power person and then just replicating that disempowerment, even though the power person is no longer around, is something that comes from that power person dynamic in childhood. Growing up in some sort of a tyrannical environment where one was invalidated. And so one automatically assumes that they're invalid because they've been invalidated so many times by the people they trust, or they should be able to trust, like parents, that maybe weren't so trustworthy. And when one grows up in those situations and begins to identify with that person who's not functioning as a human being, then waking up to that dynamic within oneself and being able to literally remove those dynamics from the mind becomes a really big key in the healing process. If one adapts to and takes on the message that the power person gave them, they usually, for most of their lives, will go into codependent relationship with others that they can blame for the way they're behaving and the way they're acting. You know, I'm only angry because you made me angry. I'm only afraid because you made me afraid. And that person will oftentimes then use the very tactics that the power person used on them with the person that they're in relationship with. And the whole issue is something that, once again, needs to be forgiven. So these dynamics can operate in every area of one's life, in just relationships, in their social lives, in professional, academic life, and of course, family life. Oftentimes, people who have, it's been documented that people with these kinds of issues end up being in the helping professions, you know, psychologists, educators, healthcare, therapists. And many of the traits that they've incorporated are those that came from the interaction with the power person. Oftentimes, the desire to heal the power person can be a motivator for going into the healing professions. One can get stuck in overthinking things, and oftentimes children who shouldn't be required to think in a way, or to use their minds in a way that they have to figure things out to survive. If they have to do that early, then it tends to stunt the ability to be flexible in other areas. Because, and survival doesn't necessarily mean physical survival. It can be psychological survival. You know, the parent who's abusive and threatens the fabric of the child's psyche ends up reflecting, their behaviors end up reflecting in that child's life as they grow and are stuck intellectually at the level that the power person was functioning. When if you spot yourself in any of that, it can be really important to recognize that while as a child it seemed like figuring it out was the key to survival, forgiveness needs to come to the forefront, because carrying on a life trying to figure everything out is one of the ways to shut down creative capacity. So one tries to sort things out intellectually that really shouldn't need to be sorted out intellectually. And when forgiveness is applied, literally the underlying dynamics of that are simply exposed to love and changed, literally transmuted. in a world where a child grows up and is accepted for who they are and what people would call their imperfections, that aren't imperfections at all. They're just the unique person that is. And, some of one's characteristics might be, that people would disapprove of. And yet, here's a human being that simply needs to be embraced in love with their weaknesses and their foibles as well. And so that becomes a necessary characteristic to develop for yourself, by yourself, to be able to accept the faults, and rather than striving to have to do everything perfectly or to have to do everything, to be able to sit back and take care of yourself alleviates the stress. And remember that stress is created by goals. And if the goal is, I have to be perfect, I have to do everything because that's the only way I get to survive with my power person, or that's the only way I get my power person's approval, then one overloads themselves, which leads to all kinds of assaults to their own bodies. And it's time to get free of those dynamics. And of course, the key tool is looking at any given moment, what's the goal that's driving my mind? And instead of functioning out of fear, power, control, then by really identifying the goal that's driving those behaviors, a whole dynamic that maybe has been going on in the family system for generations can be literally removed in a matter of seconds. The difference being is what one would call a constructive behavior being done out of a constructive purpose and a mind connected to love. That could be a wondrous, healthy behavior for somebody to do. The same behavior motivated by fear of loss or fear of attack or fear of disapproval can lead to deeper disease processes. And that's where letting loose of the judgments on self and taking care of self becomes such a key. If one has a tyrannical voice inside of their heads, they often project that tyrannical voice on someone else, but the voice that they're listening to, well, they think it's their own, is really their power person. And so these all become dynamics that ultimately one would pick up and do a worksheet around in order to drop into the underlying layers. And Jeanie mentioned the last week or so a particular passage in the Course in Miracles that says, you may wonder why you must look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. When you look at the Course in Miracles, and many people look at the Course and it's all supposed to be lovey-dovey, but it's really clear that if there's hatred in there, you better take hold of it. You better allow yourself to be with it and process through it. And that particular lesson talks about the reason for that is because what's going on in the surface mind isn't what it's about, it's what's underlying it. And there's where the first century Aramaic forgiveness process becomes so powerful, because it allows one to drop into the underlying dynamic in the most reliable, the fastest way that I know of anywhere on the planet. So make sure that, if any of that resonates for you, that you establish some goals for taking care of yourself. And if you were punished for stepping up and doing something, and I remember when Michael J. was small, my son, we had him in a particular school that was supposed to be a really awesome school. And after just a few days, and this is when he was probably five or six, he would literally, if I was ushering him or walking him into the classroom, he'd be pushing against the door frame. No, I don't want to go. And up to that point, he had just loved learning. The next day, I went back to the school, and I sat in the classroom with, just in the background. And what I observed was that Michael had, there'd been several days in the classroom at the beginning of the year, and he'd noticed that at a particular time, there was intermission and snack time. And what I watched was Michael J. getting up when that process started to happen without having to be told to, and going and washing his hands to get ready for snack. And the teacher, sort of in a terse voice, sat him back down and said, no, and made him wait for all the other kids to wash their hands and get their snacks, and then forced him to go back up and wash his hands again. He'd taken an initiative, he knew what was going on, and so was, but no, the rules require that you wait for the teacher to tell you, like the ultimate of a control trip. And many times kids are brought up in that kind of environment, and there's a hesitance to take responsibility for choices or to take an initiative because they were punished for it. So there's all the different kinds of dynamics that can go on under the surface that if they're forgiven, then one can go back to their original intelligence, their original being, and function from that, because they haven't internalized the punishment dynamic or the disapproval dynamic, whatever it was. If you had a power person that no matter what you did, it wasn't good enough, it was disapproval, and notice how often, you bring out disapproval toward others. And that's just a reflection of the internal dynamic that when forgiven, you can watch somebody that does something that you go, oh, that isn't the way I do it, but you can be with it and hold a space of love for it and, move on, rather than having to go into, giving the lecture about why it's disapproved of. So there's just some of the dynamics that happen in childhood that ultimately, when we become aware of it as adults, we realize that some of those childhood realities, things formed in the mind in early life, can take over and run our lives. And the objective here is that nothing from the past can run your life, that you're always literally wide awake, functioning as love and functioning out of full awareness of the actuality of what's happening in the environment, and creatively interacting in a way that has you doing the highest and best that you're capable of, rather than being restricted by some old reality, some generational pattern in the mind. So that would be sort of a synopsis of some of the work that's oftentimes called inner child work, dealing with the dynamics that come from childhood. And it can be a powerful way to open a space within yourself for a whole new level of aliveness, of joy, of function, of creativity. And of course, that process of recognizing at any point, and when I do the forgiveness process, I don't have to be thinking about, or I don't have to be in an experience that happened 20 years ago to have something triggered into activity and go, oh, I'm gonna literally sit down and do a worksheet on this thing that happened 20 years ago. Go back and be that person and allow yourself to go through that process. And it just it'll open all kinds of dynamics and literally remove the interference patterns from the past generations that inhibit full aliveness at every moment of your life. And that quite literally is the purpose of this whole body of work. So we're delighted to be here having a conversation with you, and wonder, does that resonate anything for you? What's happening? What's moving in your mind? What's moving in your life? Is there anything we can do to support you? Questions, thoughts, answers, ideas? Again, our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you in our control panel, it's 563-999-3581. Call that number. You'll be listening to the show directly on your phone. And then if you push 1, that will raise a hand in the control panel, and we'll be having a conversation. So, Ms. Jeanie, do we have anybody to have a conversation with out there?
We do not. It is all quiet.
Okay. Well, if you're out there in listener land and you have a thought for us, please push 1. Let's talk about it. If you're free of questions of any kind, and there's nothing we can do to support you at this point, seeing as how we are on this outing with family right now, I'm pretty much complete with what I had wanted to present. And so if nobody has a question, then I think we'll close the show out just a little bit early, seeing as how we've got family here from Canada, and we're just kind of hanging out and getting ready for some lunch. So last call for a hand up if you're out there in listener land. Any thoughts, questions, answers, ideas? Anything else for you to add, Jeanie?
No, I'm complete.
Okay. Well, let's close the show out a little early, and thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you. Well, tomorrow is Friday.
I'll be playing a show tomorrow because we'll be on the road.
Yeah, so we'll see you on Monday. Blessings.